Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscaper podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing business content from accomplished leaders to bring you value, to scale your business, and to better yourself personally. And really hopefully you enjoyed. Cheers, everyone. Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscapers podcast. I'm super excited to be joined today by Alan Miltz. Alan has joined us all the way from Australia, and been trying to get Alan on the show for a while. We've had some different scheduling conflicts, so glad we finally managed to connect. So thank you, Alan, for joining me.
And thank you, Robert, from down under. G'day.
G'day. So tell me, Alan, tell me the audience a little bit about your background. I mean, you've got such an extensive background, but rather than me trying to butcher it, I'd love to hear directly from you.
Okay, so I'm a South African chartered accountant by training. And about 30 years ago, I emigrated to Australia and I was involved in setting up a clothing company here called Esprit. So my background is finance, but I grew up in the fashion industry and stayed at Esprit for a few years and then realized I was unemployable, had to work for myself, and started to advise CEOs in textile, clothing, footwear companies, and realized wherever I went, nobody understood the numbers. And even worse, we business spoke one language, the bank spoke another language, and the accounting profession even different. And three of us got together. We were all South African immigrants, all chartered accountants, and we had this massive global vision. Imagine if we could change the way the world looked at numbers. And our first target market was the banks. The banks primarily were using Moody's as the analysis engine. And Moody's was an unbelievable credit tool to enable banks to look at a business and get an opinion about their capacity to repay. And the three of us said to each other, a bank doing its job should be able to speak internally to credit, and they do that brilliantly. But the customer is a partner, and they need to speak to the customer in a language they would understand. So we created a product. We called it Optimist. We raised private equity from Australia's wealthiest family, and the story began. 20 years later, my system today is used by over 500 of the global banks. It's today one of the biggest banking technology companies globally. I made a lot of mistakes. I sold the company too early. It's 8 years ago. And then we raised too much capital, so we got diluted. But I can tell everyone what I created, I know is being used as the global standard by which banks look at numbers. And then when we sold the company, two of the founders, myself and Joss Milner, got together and we said, let's now focus on business. Business, the numbers tell a story. Imagine if we can enable every company to look at their numbers and understand the story and then have the techniques to improve that story. And that was the birth of Cash Flow Story. So Cash Flow Story was founded about 6-7 years ago. And today we're in 98 countries around the world, which is almost the entire globe, and used by about 50,000 scorecards have been created. So we got a lot of usage. And one of my biggest KPIs or accolades in my career is Verne Harnish, the great thought leader, the author of the book Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up. Verne approached me when writing Scaling Up and said, there are 4 disciplines or 4 decisions in a company to scale: people, strategy, execution, and cash. Would you co-author the book and write the cash component? So I call myself a co-author. Verne calls me a co-author. And Scaling Up today is, I think, the best business book in about 8 countries. So I feel absolutely privileged in my career to have got to so many countries and through the book Scaling Up, appeal to so many organizations wanting to scale. So my whole life has been dedicated towards making people love the numbers and understand them.
No, that's extremely impressive, Alan. As a scaling up coach myself, I've obviously have the privilege of seeing you speak on a number of occasions. I've read the Scaling Up book, obviously on multiple occasions. I've used your tools, and I think that's why I thought it was so important for you to be in the show, expose you to my listeners, my clients. But going back to one of the things you said, it's very true how a lot of business owners will switch off. They'll just get confused. They'll just get all flustered when they're forced to look at the financials. And the fact that you call your product the cash flow story just makes it almost a little bit more appealing to dive in, to understand it, learn the story. I'd love you just to go dive into that a little bit deeper, talking about things like the critical levers. What are some of the critical numbers that a lot of business owners should be looking at?
So thank you. So never before has cash been more important in a business. In 2022, 23, wherever I go in the world, I'm seeing the same problems. Supply chain, inflation, and the ability to attract and retain people. Those are the three major business issues. So never before has numbers been more important. Every company I walk into discusses with me their revenue, their margins, their profit. And every business I ever see or ever present to, I say revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king. Very few companies understand the concept of cash. In simple terms, cash is the movement in all your bank accounts. So if you said to me, what is cash flow? If you look at your bank balances, your cash in the bank, your short and long-term debt, and you compare it opening versus closing, the movement is your cash flow. And there's always a big difference between profit and cash. A story of numbers is told over 4 chapters. We business love chapter 1, profit. Equally important to the profit in a company are the 3 items of chapter 2 are called working capital. Are you collecting properly? How much inventory you've got? Or in a service company, do you invoice the work you do quickly enough? And do you have the right terms with your suppliers? Receivables, inventory, WIP, less payables is your working capital. The rest of the balance sheet is primarily the noise. I just call that other capital. So a story of numbers, chapter 1 is your profit. Chapter 2 is your working capital. Chapter 3 is other. The result of your business is cash, the movement in all your bank accounts. Now, every business I see says to me, Alan, thank you. Tell me how to make more cash. There's only 7 things or 7 levers a company can play with to improve your profit, your cash, and the valuation of your company. And we call those 7 levers the power of 1. There are 4 profit levers: price, volume, margins, and your overheads. There are 3 working capital levers: accounts receivable, inventory, and payables. Are you collecting? Are you invoicing? Or how much inventory do you hold? And how do you pay the suppliers? Everybody in your company owns the story. Everybody in the company with every transaction should be saying, how many 1% changes can I make to improve the profit and the cash flow of the business? Companies who I've worked with, and I'll probably sit on the board of about 20 global companies now, you say to them, your cash flow is great. When did it happen? Every company answers the same way. I've got no idea. But every single day for the last 1 or 2 years, we've been thinking about the 7 levers with every transaction. And it's these little 1% and one-day changes that you make over and over again that generates the business you've all dreamt of. So people say to me, who owns the numbers? Your accountant, your CFO is responsible for reporting, and they do a brilliant job. Everybody in the company owns the job of improvement. Everybody in the company is responsible for the power of one. So for example, the sales guys, they impacting price and volume. I cannot tell you how many salespeople I come across who say, let's give a discount to sell more. Now, maybe that's the worst decision the company could have made. Maybe it's better to put prices up and sell a bit less. Maybe that's a better outcome for cash. Margin or the responsibility of your operational people. Overheads, everyone. Accounts receivable. Your salespeople need to educate the customer how to pay. The accountants obviously are responsible for that number as well. Inventory, work in progress, operational measures. So everybody in your company impacts your story. Everyone needs to understand the story and how to improve it. And that's the power of one.
That's excellent. Excellent, Alan. You touched on this earlier, that we're obviously going through some major financial turmoil around the world. And I just wonder how frequently should leadership management teams be looking at some of those critical numbers, again, just to make some decisions within the company? Is that done weekly? Is it done monthly? What's your best advice to companies?
Well, reporting should be done on a monthly basis. So a company produces their financials, the accountant does a great job, report monthly. But typically from a strategy side, because most companies have got quarterly cycles, they collect in 60 days, they hold 90 days of inventory. On a quarterly basis, I would challenge the 4 chapters of your company and then run a power of one workshop to see the various levers which we can change to drive improvement. So on a quarterly basis, we need to be running a proper power of one workshop in the organization.
No, that's so true. No,
and interesting, Robert, so for example, just before this podcast, I was in a board meeting. A company is an importer distributor. We look at their financials, margins have dropped, overheads have increased, and we need to pay the suppliers quicker to be on top of the queue to secure our goods. So if you think about it, you've got worse on margin, overheads climbing, payable days coming down, cash flow obviously being impacted. What we then workshopped, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You're impacting some levers. Which other power of one levers can we mitigate to solve the cash flow burn? So how much do we need to put up prices, for example? With the extra inventory we're holding, how much do we need to grow volume? And then we look at what can we do to educate the customers to pay us faster. So once you understand the risk, you then look at the mitigant using other levers of the power of one. But everyone understood the story. Everyone understood the impact of inflation, supply chain, and then we had a mitigant using the power of one levers to solve the problem.
No, that's tremendous, Alan. Good to come up with a game plan. But talk to me about, a company comes to you, Alan, and they realize they're in a mess financially, you know, you do the cash flow exercise with them, find out what their issues are. Talk through the process about developing some type of a strategy, whether it be to get more market gain, maybe it be they're trying to ramp up the value of the business, maybe they've been planning an exit and obviously planning this recession. But how do you effectively build up that strategy?
So for example, when a company comes to see me, the first thing I say to them is, let's do a financial health check on your business. And when you present the numbers back to the management team and you say to them, let's discuss chapter 1 profit, every person around the room is interpreting the company the same way. And then I do the same thing, and I've done it literally thousands of times. I say to them, these are your financials, tell me your cash flow. And not one person around the room understands the business in the same way. It's like you've asked a rocket science question, and it's something that's so basic. And then I show the client, let's look at all your bank accounts, let's look at the movement, and let's compare it to the profit. Can you see there's a massive difference? And then we say to them, okay, well, let's now create a one-page scorecard that the most non-financial person would understand. Chapter 1 is your profit. You all know that. Chapter 4 is your cash, the movement in bank accounts. Chapter 2 is equally important to the management team. It's what's happened to your working capital, which we can obviously calculate pretty quickly. It's the movement in your receivables, inventory, payables. And then chapter 3 is the balancing item. So then on one piece of paper, I can say to someone, you've made 10,000 profit, but your cash flow is -9. Let me show you what's happened. What happened in chapter 1? What happened in chapter 2? What happened in chapter 3? Now we understand your cash. And then we say, let's now discuss the improvement, and we go through the 7 levers that we can change in the way we run the business. Every company needs to understand, what does success look like? In other words, every dollar you sell, what percentage margin should you make? Sell $1, I want to make 40% margin. Most companies will tell you how much profit they want to make. I want to make 10% profit. So expressed as $1 of revenue, 40% margin, your overheads are 30, you make 10% profit. I then say to the company, how quickly should you collect it? 60 days. How frequently should you invoice the work you do? Every 14 days. Or how much inventory do you need to hold? 60 days. What are your terms with your suppliers? 30 days. So you define color code green. For those people who are not financially literate, I can show a company every month, every quarter, what's red, yellow, green in your company. And then when you're having a management meeting, you say to them, can you see why your cash is not good? You're running most of your profit in color code yellow, and you're running your working capital in color code red. Let's now discuss the changes in the way you're running your business to achieve the green. What do we need to do to get to 40% margin, 30% overheads, 10% profit, collecting in 60 days, for example? Everybody in a company needs to understand what success looks like and the way you should run a company. And when you have a meeting, what do we need to do to get back to green? Make your business simple. Everyone thinks numbers are complicated. The numbers are actually so simple. Everything is improved by the 7 levers, the power of 1.
Now, you make some great points, Alan. And it's interesting how I'll go into a lot of companies, and the owners will typically keep the financials secret. They'll hide them away. They won't want to share them. a lot of the time they don't necessarily understand them themselves because they're relying on their controller, their CFO for producing the numbers for them. But as you just mentioned, really the ownership of those numbers, everybody in the company, especially in the management leadership level, should be responsible for them. So, I mean, surely there must be some higher level of priority to get the management team more literate in understanding financials.
Well, Robert, that's where I've dedicated my life, but I come across the same issues in about 50% of companies. People say, we show our profit to the management team, we don't discuss cash because we don't understand it. The balance sheet we never look at. And they say to me, we don't really want to share numbers. And my answer is, start with the power of one. The beautiful thing about the power of one is that you're not sharing numbers. You're sharing the impact of a 1% change. So no one will know your profit, no one will know your cash, but they will know what a 1% change does or a one-day change does. In nearly every company I come across, changing 1 or 2% in the way you run a business can almost double your cash. And people don't realize how little changes can have such a major impact on your business. And as soon as you engage the people, they start to say, we can do that. The automatic statement when I see any company, price is going to be very sensitive, I say to them, well, our industry says you can't put prices up. And then you show them what a 1% price change does versus a 1% volume change. And they see a massive differential. The salespeople change their whole thinking. They say, you know what? We can definitely put prices up by 1 or 2%. So what I'm saying to you, if you don't want to share your numbers, you're probably with half the world. But sharing the power of one, you're not sharing your numbers, you're sharing the impact of improvement. And that's what your company wants to do. If you read the book Scaling Up, People, Strategy, Execution, Cash, you will never achieve cash flow excellence without the right people. The right people, a team of A players, by definition, you need to teach them how to play the game better. If you want to retain your best staff, teach them how to play the game called making more money. And that's played through the power of one.
I love that. I love that. Alan, I'm sure there's a lot of people on the podcast right now thinking, yep, I need to get hold of your tools, your exercises, your courses. What's the best place for people to find out more and how they can get start to do that, the cash flow story?
It's a cash flow story website. The software is inexpensive. It's available, as I said, we're in 97 countries around the world. And that will obviously produce for you the power of one, your 4 chapters, etc. So that would be for the tool. Read the book Scaling Up. That is a must-read book. I do run a lot of courses. The Growth Institute is one of my major institutions we run a 7-week program on finance, a masterclass on finance, CFO, CEO, sales, marketing, and over the 7 weeks, 1 hour per week, you will become an absolute master in understanding the numbers and how to improve it. Or go to my website and make an appointment to speak to me. But my mission or my purpose is to make the numbers simple, and everyone should love them and embrace them. Don't be scared.
Alan, really appreciate your time today. I'm sure this is music to a lot of people's ears that have been, I don't know, unwilling to share that they don't understand the numbers, worried about how they cover payroll, things like that. So this is going to be a huge help to them. So Alan, again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your mission in trying to simplify the numbers, to just get people to understand them a little bit better. So appreciate your time, Alan.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and you got some great takeaways for your business or for your personal life. This is Robert Clinkenbeard along with David Edmondson. I would love to get you and your friends to join us on your journey. If you have any ideas for future speakers, or if you just want to pass this on to friends, family, other business colleagues to sign up and subscribe, that would be awesome. Anyway, thanks everyone, and have a great 2022. Cheers.